Tammy Wynette and George Jones were more than just a couple. They were country music's most legendary pair, a union of passion, artistry, and heartbreak. Together, they lived a story that blended love and music so tightly that fans could hardly separate one from the other. Their voices harmonized as if they had been born to sing side by side, and for a time, their marriage symbolized the very heart of country music. Yet behind the spotlight, their lives were a storm of tenderness and turmoil. They were partners on stage, partners in love, and later bitterly estranged, living in separate orbits that only occasionally crossed. And still, in the final chapter of Tammy's life, fate brought them back together. In one quiet exchange of words, the years of distance seemed to dissolve, leaving behind a moment George Jones carried with him until his own final days. Before they became a cautionary tale, Tammy and George were the crown jewels of country music. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, no couple captured America's heart quite like they did. Tammy Wynette, with her plaintive voice and unshakable poise, had already become the first lady of country music through timeless hits like Stand By Your Man and DIVOCE. Each lyric she sang carried pieces of her real life, etched with the grit and resilience of a woman who had endured hardship. George, meanwhile, was already considered by many to be the greatest country singer alive. His voice could bend and break in ways that turned sorrow into poetry, leaving audiences in tears. But while his talent was unmatched, George's personal life was clouded by demons: alcohol, erratic behavior, and the pressures of fame that had already cost him one marriage. When Tammy and George came together, it felt destined. Their chemistry was undeniable both on and off stage. They fell in love quickly, and in 1969, their marriage was celebrated not only by fans, but by the entire country music community. For the industry, it was like watching royalty join forces. Together, they seemed to embody the very essence of the music they sang. Their duets painted vivid portraits of devotion and endurance. Songs like We're Going to Hold On sounded like promises, pledges that their love would survive no matter what came their way. On stage, Tammy often looked at George as though no one else in the room existed, while George seemed calmed by her presence. His turbulent mood softened when she stood beside him. Their bond was magnetic, and to audiences, it looked unshakable. But fame has a way of amplifying both triumph and trouble. Behind the curtain, cracks in their marriage grew deeper. George's drinking worsened, his reputation for missing shows and unpredictable behavior overshadowing his brilliance. Tammy, always the consummate professional, worked tirelessly to keep their image intact while battling her own health struggles. For her, touring meant not just performing, but also caring for George, managing his moods, and sometimes picking up the pieces when things spiraled out of control. Friends and fellow musicians witnessed the strain: shouting matches backstage, long silences on the tour bus, and nights spent in separate hotel rooms. Still, both understood the weight of their image. They were country music's golden couple, and their fans believed in them. Ending things wasn't simply a private matter, it would be a public heartbreak. In 1975, the inevitable happened. Tammy filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The announcement sent shockwaves through Nashville and beyond. Fans who had believed in their love songs couldn't fathom that the partnership was over. For Tammy, it was both devastating and necessary. She had fought hard to keep their marriage intact, but the toll on her health and happiness was too great. George, later in life, admitted his behavior had played a large role in pushing her away. Yet, even divorce couldn't completely sever what they had shared. They remained linked through their music and through the complicated history that bound them together. At award shows, recording sessions, or occasional performances, their paths would cross, and the flicker of connection was still visible. As years passed, both remarried. Tammy continued to tour and record, though her health grew increasingly fragile. George eventually found stability with Nancy, the wife he credited with saving his life. Still, fans never stopped hoping for a musical reunion, and every so often, that wish came true. In the 1980s, they recorded together again, producing bittersweet classics like Two-Story House and Golden Ring. These songs resonated deeply because they sounded like lived truth. two people singing about love and loss from opposite sides of their own broken marriage. Yet their once effortless intimacy was replaced with a polite distance. They could laugh together on stage, but when the lights dimmed, they returned to separate lives. By the 1990s, Tammy Wynette had endured decades of both triumph and struggle. She had recorded dozens of albums, won countless awards, and remained one of the most recognizable voices in country music. But privately, her health battles were relentless. Multiple surgeries, chronic pain, and hospital visits left her exhausted, though she rarely let the public see her suffering. George, meanwhile, was enjoying a late career resurgence, having finally gained control over some of his old demons. Though they no longer shared time off stage, both carried an unspoken respect for each other. Fate intervened again in the late 1990s when a televised reunion performance was planned to honor their legacy. To everyone's surprise, both Tammy and George agreed. When they walked into rehearsal, it was as though time folded back on itself. The old magic was still there. George's voice wrapping around Tammy's eyes softening as she looked at him. Their performance was powerful, but what mattered most happened after the camera shut off. Away from the spotlight, the two spoke quietly, just the two of them. George later described it as a moment of peace. Not long after, Tammy's health deteriorated rapidly. By early 1998, she was visibly weakened, but she continued to perform as long as she could. In her final weeks, fate brought George to her side one last time. This meeting wasn't for the public, not for the cameras, but just for them. According to those closest, Tammy's last words to George were filled with love and forgiveness. Simple, heartfelt, and enduring, they carried the weight of their entire history, the glory, the regret, the music, and the bond that even divorce could not erase. George never revealed those exact words, keeping them as his own private treasure. But friends said the change in him afterwards was undeniable. He spoke of Tammy with softness, no longer dwelling on their fights, only on the love and respect that had survived everything. When Tammy passed in April 1998, George carried her memory with him into every performance. Songs like Golden Ring and We're Going to Hold On took on new layers of emotion, as if her voice still lingered beside him. In interviews, George never gave away the secret of her final words, but he hinted at the peace they had made. He would only say, "We made peace." And for fans, that was enough. It told them that after decades of love and pain, they had found forgiveness. George Jones lived for another 15 years, but Tammy was never far from his thoughts. Even Nancy, his devoted wife who had saved him from his darkest days, understood that Tammy remained part of his story. She was not competition, but a chapter that could never be erased. In his final years, George often reflected on the people who shaped his life, and Tammy was always among them. When he died in April 2013, tributes poured in, many with images of him and Tammy together, reminders that their story had never truly ended. At George's funeral, one of their duets played softly as the crowd reflected on his life. In that moment, it was clear that Tammy and George's love story wasn't about perfection, it was about reality. It was messy, it was painful, but it was also filled with genuine connection and unforgettable music. And in the end, Tammy's last words gave their story a sense of completion. They weren't words of bitterness, but of love and forgiveness. A reminder that even the most complicated relationships can hold moments of pure grace. Their story remains one of country music's greatest legends, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And as long as their songs continue to play, fans will always imagine that final moment between Tammy Wynette and George Jones when love, after everything, had the last word.